That night changed everything. When my dad snuck into my room while my mom was sleeping. Before we go any further, I want to be clear. This story deals with heavy themes: emotional manipulation, fractured family roles, and infidelity. If those things make you uncomfortable, it's completely okay to skip this one. This is my story. It's raw, it's messy, and honestly, it still hurts to tell it. I was 26 when I moved back home. Not ideal. Not what I pictured when I thought about what life in my mid-20s would look like. I had been engaged. His name was Gavin Horton. We were 2 months away from the wedding when everything fell apart. He told me he didn't trust me anymore. Said he felt like there was someone else. There wasn't. Not in the way he thought. We weren't perfect, but I loved him. Still do, maybe. But that suspicion? It took over everything. He went through my phone. Read private messages. Accused me of hiding feelings. Eventually, he packed his things and left. So I did what most broken people do. I ran home to where things felt familiar. Or, where I thought they would. My parents were happy to take me in. Bonnie Dean, my mother, runs a vintage furniture store in town. She's quiet. Sharp. Observant to a fault. And my dad. Dallas Hahn. He's the kind of man who fills up every room he enters. Loud. Charismatic. Always hugging someone. Always with some story to tell. People love him. Growing up, I was always his favorite. Everyone said it. Even my mom. We were close. He used to call me his little lifeline. That closeness, it felt special. But moving back in, it started to feel different. There were moments that made me pause. The way he looked at me sometimes. The way his hand would linger just a second too long when he hugged me. Nothing outright wrong. Just, off. I brushed it off as me being overly sensitive. I mean, who was I to judge what felt normal? My whole life had just flipped upside down. The days blended. I helped around the house. Cooked. Cleaned. Tried to stay out of the way. Dallas loved having me back. Almost too much. He'd come into the kitchen while I was making breakfast and lean against the counter just watching me. Telling me how proud he was. Calling me beautiful. It didn't feel like a father admiring his daughter. It felt like a man studying a woman. Again, no hard evidence. Just that persistent itch. Like something was staring at me when I turned my back. And then there was my mom. Bonnie kept her distance. She wasn't cold exactly, but there was a stiffness in how she spoke. Like she didn't know how to be in the same room with both of us at once. She'd disappear into her workshop or go to bed early. Leaving me and Dallas alone more often than not. We started having late-night talks. Dad would knock on my door, cup of tea in hand, and just sit. Ask me about Gavin. Ask how I was holding up. I'd cry sometimes. He'd hold my hand. And maybe that's what makes this so hard to explain. He made me feel seen. Like someone still wanted me, even when I felt discarded. But there were comments. Jokes that made my skin crawl. He once said Gavin must have been insane to leave someone like me, and added, if I were your age, I'd marry you in a heartbeat. I laughed it off. What else was I supposed to do? I didn't realize I was ignoring every red flag. I didn't realize how blurred the lines had become. I thought I was just healing. But that night changed all of it. If you're still with me, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this. Trust me, there's so much more to uncover. I remember being a little girl, probably 5 or 6, sitting on my dad's lap in the backyard while he read some mystery novel out loud like it was a bedtime story. He'd change all the characters' names to mine. The detective became Fallon. The damsel, Fallon. Even the villain. Everything was somehow about me. And I loved it. I ate it up. In my eyes, he was everything a dad should be: funny, dependable, present. The kind of man who could fix a broken sink and still make up songs to cheer me up when I was sick. He never missed a school recital or a parent-teacher meeting. And when I was younger, I thought that made me lucky. But memory is a tricky thing. It reshapes itself when you look back with clearer eyes. There was a night, must have been around middle school, when I came downstairs for dinner wearing a new top. It was nothing wild. Just something I picked out with my mom at the outlet mall. But when my dad saw it, his whole mood changed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He looked me up and down and said, "That's a bit much, don't you think?" Then he made a joke about boys not being able to focus in school if I wore things like that. My mom stayed quiet. She just slid the casserole into the oven and kept her head down. That's how most of those moments went. Subtle. Private. Covered in a layer of supposed concern. As I got older, those little moments added up. Freshman year of high school, I went to homecoming with a boy named Bentley Santos. Sweet guy. Nervous, kind of lanky, but polite. He came by to pick me up, and I'll never forget the way my dad shook his hand. Firm grip, eyes locked, smile that never reached his eyes. He pulled me aside after and asked if I was sure I wanted to be alone with someone like that. He said boys only wanted one thing. That I was too special to waste myself. At the time, I told myself he was just being protective. That it was love in disguise. But looking back now, I see how that possessiveness wasn't about keeping me safe, it was about control. And even though I left for college, lived on my own, had real adult relationships, something about his voice still echoed in my head every time I made a choice. Especially when it came to love. After Gavin left, I started journaling. Not in a cute, TikTok aesthetic way. I mean, really writing. Not for healing. More like a desperate attempt to get out of my own head. I'd sit on the floor of my childhood bedroom, pen clenched tight, scrawling out questions I couldn't answer. Did I lead Gavin on? Did I make him think I was cheating, even if I wasn't? Was it my fault? And every time I wrote about Gavin, I somehow ended up writing about my dad. It scared me, honestly, how often his name showed up. How many lines blurred between Gavin's jealousy and my father's old warnings. How I'd found comfort in men who hovered too close. Who protected me by isolating me. I didn't like the pattern. I just didn't know how to break it. That's when I decided to see someone. A therapist. Her name was Dr. Ramona Barrera. She worked out of a quiet office above a florist shop downtown. Small space. Light blue walls. A little tea kettle always steaming in the corner. The first few sessions, I mostly talked about Gavin. About the heartbreak. The accusations. The end. She listened patiently, nodding occasionally, scribbling something in her notepad that she never let me see. But one day, maybe the third or fourth session, she asked me something that froze me completely. She said, "What does your father's love feel like? Not look like. Not sound like. But feel." I sat there for too long, not answering. When I finally spoke, I said, "Safe, but intense. Like I owe him something." She looked at me kindly, but directly. And she said something that I didn't want to hear, but couldn't forget. "That sounds less like love and more like emotional enmeshment." I blinked. I'd never heard the word before. I asked her what it meant. She explained it gently, like someone walking a scared animal closer to the gate. She said it happens when boundaries in a relationship, especially between parent and child, get tangled. When one person starts to blur the line between support and control. When your identity gets so wrapped up in someone else's approval that you stop knowing where you end and they begin. And that was the moment things started to click. My dad wasn't just affectionate. He was entangled in my identity. Every major decision I made, from college to career to men, I thought about how he'd feel. Whether he'd approve. Whether I'd disappoint him. She asked me if my dad respected my boundaries growing up. I laughed a little too hard. Then I got quiet. No. He didn't. But I never thought to call it that. I never called it wrong. She gave me homework that week. To write down the moments in my life when I felt like I had to make myself smaller to keep someone else comfortable. I filled 3 pages that night. All of them had my father's name on them. And suddenly, I started questioning everything. Not just the past, but the present. The way he looked at me lately. The way his hugs felt tighter. Longer. The way he called me baby girl in a tone that didn't sit right. The comments about Gavin. The late night talks. The praise about how I grew into such a beautiful woman. It was all there. In plain sight. But I hadn't been able to see it until someone said it out loud. It's wild how language can shine a light on what your body already knows. That week, I started locking my door at night. Just, in case. I wasn't trying to find anything. That's the strangest part. I wasn't snooping or digging or on a mission to uncover family secrets. I was just organizing boxes in the hallway closet because my mom had asked me to. Old tax records, expired warranties, a million instruction manuals to appliances that probably don't even work anymore. There was a little bundle of folded paper shoved inside an envelope marked receipts. No return address. No name. The handwriting wasn't my dad's. It was neat. Careful. Blue ink. The paper was creased, but not yellowed, probably written within the last 10 years. I opened it without thinking. Just curious. And then I read the first line. I still remember the smell of paint on your hands the last night we kissed. I froze. My eyes skimmed down the page like they were chasing something they weren't ready to find. You told me we couldn't keep meeting like that, but I still watched you drive away with your heart in your mouth. I wanted to run after you, but I knew what kind of man you were married to. I read it again. Slower. This time, the words didn't feel poetic. They felt real. Present. And aimed directly at someone I knew, my mother. I sat there on the hallway floor for a long time, the letter trembling in my hand. It wasn't signed. There was no date. Just the weight of truth, quiet and heavy. It hit me in waves. The woman I'd always seen as emotionally distant, emotionally absent even, had once loved someone enough to risk everything. Or maybe she already knew something was broken and just didn't have the strength to leave. I didn't know. But what I did know was that she had hidden this part of herself from me, from my father, maybe even from herself. And if she could carry that kind of secret, what else was I not seeing? It made me think back to all those silent dinners, to the way she never laughed at my dad's jokes the way other women did, to the way her eyes wandered out the window when he told his long stories about the good old days. Maybe she had checked out years ago. Maybe he broke her in some quiet way she never told anyone about. I put the letter back exactly where I found it. I didn't tell her I'd read it, not yet. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, after dinner, I asked her a question. Not directly. I was too scared for that. Instead, I kept my voice light, like I wasn't dying inside. Did you and Dad ever go through rough patches? I asked as she was rinsing dishes. She didn't look at me. Just ran her fingers under the water and said, "Who doesn't?" I pressed a little more, trying to keep it casual. I mean, I don't know. You just seem kind of separate lately. This time she paused. Not long, but enough to notice. She turned off the faucet, dried her hands with the towel that hung from the drawer handle, and finally looked at me. Her eyes were tired. Not angry. Not scared. Just old. And sad. There are some things about your father you'll never understand, she said quietly. Just be careful, Fallon. Then she walked away. I stood in that kitchen for a long time after she left, pretending to organize the silverware drawer like my thoughts weren't unraveling one by one. Be careful. That sentence echoed in my head like an alarm I couldn't shut off. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe my mom saw what I was trying not to see. Maybe she'd seen it all along. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart too loud, my mind racing. And somewhere in that insomnia haze, I found myself scrolling through my old Instagram followers, like I was searching for something, someone who knew me before all this mess. That's when I saw his name. Ronan Quintana. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since high school, really. He was the boy who used to draw song lyrics on my notebook covers. The one who waited outside theater rehearsal just to walk me home in the rain. He once carved my name into a bench behind the gym with the tip of his house key. Said he wanted me to live somewhere permanent. I hadn't thought about him in so long. But there he was. Still in town. Married. 2 little girls. His profile was mostly barbecue photos and family camping trips. But his eyes? They hadn't changed. Still that deep, thoughtful brown that used to make my knees go soft. I didn't mean to message him. I swear, I didn't. But my fingers moved before I could stop them. Hey stranger. Crazy seeing your face after all these years. I almost deleted it. Then I saw the typing bubble. Fallon Harrison. Wow. That just made my whole night. It started off innocent. It always does. We talked about high school. Laughed about the teachers we used to hate. Shared old photos. He told me he still had a shoebox filled with our notes. I told him I still remembered the way he used to sing under his breath when he got nervous. And then he said something that made me feel things I wasn't ready for. You were the first person who ever really saw me. I stared at that sentence until my eyes stung. Because somewhere, deep down, I still felt the same way about him. We messaged until 2 a.m. And again the next day. And the next. And suddenly, I found myself checking my phone every 5 minutes. Smiling at the screen like I was 16 again. And the worst part? It felt good. It felt like breathing after holding my breath for years. It was sometime after midnight. Maybe later. I wasn't fully asleep, one of those nights where the body is still but the mind is loud, tugging at every thread of your thoughts until sleep becomes impossible. I'd left my phone on my chest and the glow from the screen had dimmed, casting long shadows across the ceiling. And then I heard it. The soft creak of a door hinge. My bedroom door. At first, I didn't move. Thought maybe it was just the house settling. Old floorboards sighing in their sleep. But then I heard footsteps. Careful ones. Weight shifting slowly, almost like someone was trying not to be heard. I stayed still. My breath caught just slightly in my throat. Then I saw the shape. My dad. Dallas. He stepped inside my room quietly, like he had every right to be there. He wasn't holding anything. Not a glass of water, not laundry, not even the pretense of checking in. Just his hands at his sides. His head tilted slightly like he was studying me. And then, he didn't say anything. He just sat down in the chair by my window. The one I usually curled up in with a book. And he sat there. In the dark. Watching me. I didn't speak. I didn't ask why. I wanted to. My tongue felt like lead. My chest was tight, like a rope was slowly wrapping around it. But something told me not to move. Not to speak. Not yet. And then, after a long silence, he started to cry. Not loud sobs. Not shaking shoulders. Just quiet tears, the kind that come from somewhere too deep to name. His face was half lit by the soft blue hue of the moonlight filtering through the blinds. His eyes glistened. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. He wiped his cheek with the back of his hand, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low and cracked. "I feel you pulling away," he said. "I feel you, slipping." He looked down at the floor like the words hurt to say. Then back up at me. "You've always been mine. My little girl. My heart. My reason for breathing. I don't know who I am if I'm not your dad." The words didn't comfort me. They didn't land sweetly or gently. They hit with a strange weight, something that sat on my chest like a stone. I wanted to say, "I'm still your daughter. I never stopped being that." But even that felt like a lie now. Because the way he said it, mine, it didn't sound like a father mourning distance. It sounded like a man mourning possession. And suddenly, everything my therapist said rushed back to me. Emotional enmeshment. Blurred lines. Identity loss. All of it. Dallas stood slowly. Walked toward the bed. I didn't move. I couldn't. My arms felt heavy, useless. I stared at the ceiling, heart thudding, skin prickling with something I couldn't name yet. He sat on the edge of the bed. Not close, but not far either. Then he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His hand lingered on my temple, his thumb against my cheekbone. And then, he leaned down. He kissed my forehead. It wasn't the kiss itself that made me freeze. It was the way he held his lips there too long. The way his breath lingered on my skin. The way his hand slid down to cradle the side of my face like he was afraid to let go. Like he was afraid I'd disappear the second he did. I didn't close my eyes. I just stared at the wall. Then he pulled me into a hug. It was slow. Careful. Almost tender. He wrapped his arms around me and pulled me into his chest like I was something fragile. I didn't return the hug. My hand stayed at my sides. And still, he held on. My breath caught again. This wasn't love. Not the kind I understood. It was something else, something murky and hollow and possessive dressed up in affection. I was frozen in his arms, realizing in real time that he never truly saw me as a separate person. I was still, in his mind, an extension of himself. His shadow. His reflection. A daughter doesn't hug her father with fear in her bones. But I did. He whispered, "I don't want to lose you." And the way he said it, it wasn't about Gavin or therapy or anything I had going on in my life. He wasn't mourning distance. He was mourning control. I pulled back slightly, enough to create space between us, and he hesitated. Then he stood. Quiet again. Walked to the door. Didn't turn around. Just opened it and left without another word. The second the door clicked shut, I exhaled. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath. I locked it. That door. I turned the lock with shaking fingers and leaned my forehead against it, my heart thudding in my ears. I slept in my clothes that night. With the lamp on. And the next morning. I didn't say a word about it. Neither did he. I didn't sleep. My eyes closed once or twice, but every sound made me flinch. The hum of the refrigerator. The creak of the floor. The wind tapping the screen door. Everything sounded like a step. Like breath near my ear. Like presence. When the sun came up, I was already dressed. I stuffed my journal, toothbrush, and a sweatshirt into a canvas bag and walked out the front door without breakfast, without a note, without a plan. I didn't even grab socks. The air outside was cold enough to sting, and I didn't realize how hard I was shivering until I got to my car and my fingers couldn't wrap around the keys. I didn't want to go back inside. I couldn't. So I drove. No destination, just forward. Street after street, I kept going until I saw Itana Conrad's apartment building. She was the only person who wouldn't ask too many questions. My best friend since 9th grade. The one who sat next to me in every detention, who held my hair back at every party, who never judged me even when I gave her every reason to. I didn't call ahead. I didn't have the words. I buzzed her door and waited. She opened it in pajama pants and sleepy eyes. Her mouth started forming a question, then she saw my face. Without asking anything, she pulled me in and closed the door behind me. I didn't speak for an hour. Not a word. I curled up on her couch, head against her arm, while she sat beside me and let the silence do the work. She didn't ask if I wanted to talk. She didn't say, "I'm here for you." She just was. That day felt like breathing through gauze. Everything muffled. Slow. Distant. I watched her pour cereal. I watched the sun shift through the blinds. I watched a rerun of some sitcom I couldn't name. But in the background, his name echoed. Ronan. And I hated that I thought of him. I hated how much I wanted to see his name light up my phone again. I hated how desperate I felt for someone, anyone, to touch me and mean it. To tell me I was real. That I was separate. That I mattered outside of someone else's shadow. Later that evening, when Aitana stepped into the shower, I opened my phone. Ronan had messaged me. "Thinking about you today. Are you okay?" I didn't answer at first. I stared at the blinking cursor until the screen dimmed. Then I typed without thinking. "Can we meet?" He replied almost immediately. Same spot as last time. 8 p.m. No hesitation. No questions. I didn't tell Aitana where I was going. I just said I needed to get some air. And I went. It was a quiet park on the edge of town. The kind with benches that creak when you sit and street lamps that flicker more than they shine. I saw him leaning against the railing overlooking the water, hands in his pockets, face turned toward the lake like he was listening for something only he could hear. He smiled when he saw me. That crooked smile that once made every nerve in my body hum. I walked toward him slowly, half hoping he'd read my face and tell me to go home. He didn't. He opened his arms, and I stepped into them like it was muscle memory. I closed my eyes. I let myself fall into that warmth, into that old rhythm, into that feeling I'd been starving for, connection without confusion. We didn't say much. He took my hand. Drove us to a motel just outside town. We didn't even check in together. I waited in the car while he paid. And when we got inside, it happened. Not fast. Not rough. Not dramatic. It was quiet. Almost gentle. I remember the way his fingertips traced my spine, the way he kissed my shoulder before saying anything at all. I remember how I didn't cry. Not even once. I just let go. I let him touch me like I was new again. Like I wasn't stained by confusion and guilt and questions. Like I was whole. And I remember the one thing I whispered, barely audible, almost a breath. "Please, just let me feel like I'm not broken." And he did. But the feeling didn't last. The next morning, we sat on opposite sides of the bed. He didn't reach for me. Didn't pull me in. Just stared at the wall like it held the answers he needed. "I can't do this again," he said, I still locked on nothing. "It's not right." I nodded. What else was there to say? He dropped me off a block from Aitana's and didn't walk me to the door. No hug. No goodbye. Just the click of the passenger door closing behind me. I watched his car disappear down the street. Felt the ache settle into my bones. When I got upstairs, Aitana was still asleep. I crawled into the guest bed, face down, clothes still on. And I wept. I cried into the pillow until the sun was high, until my throat ached, until the guilt felt heavier than my skin. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone. And somewhere inside me, a tiny voice whispered something I couldn't silence: "You don't belong to anyone anymore." But somehow, you don't belong to yourself either. It didn't take long. 3 days after I returned to my parents' house, I walked into my room and saw the notebook on my bed, my journal. Not in the drawer where I kept it. Not tucked under sweaters in the closet. On my bed. Closed. But not untouched. The air in the house had shifted. Not loud or dramatic. Just still. Too still. My mother didn't greet me when I came in. She didn't ask where I'd been. I could feel the silence in her every step. I found her in the kitchen. She was making tea, her back to me. Her hands were steady. Her voice, when it finally came, was quiet. Controlled. I read your notebook. My body froze. She turned around, the kettle still steaming behind her, and looked at me like she'd been holding something inside for too long. At first, she said, I thought I was invading your privacy. But then I realized I needed to know how deep it had gone. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scold me. She looked sad. And tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones. I knew, she said after a moment, her voice faltering. Not all of it. But enough. My stomach dropped. I stepped back, suddenly cold. Knew what? She hesitated. Blinked like she was chasing memories she didn't want to speak aloud. Dallas, she said. Your father, he's always had a way of getting too close. Not physically, at least not where I could prove it, but emotionally. He wrapped himself around you like a second skin. I saw it. I just didn't know how to name it. And once I did, I was already too far in. I wanted to interrupt, to say she should have done something, should have stopped it. But she kept going. I stayed because I thought I was keeping the family whole. I thought if I just stayed quiet long enough, you'd grow out of it. That he'd back off once you became your own person. She sat down at the table, her hands trembling now, finally. But he never let you become your own person. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears welled, burned, and spilled all at once. I slept with someone, I said, voice barely a whisper. Ronan. Her face didn't change. I know, she said. You wrote about it. I nodded slowly, shame burning up my neck. It wasn't love. It wasn't even real. I needed to feel something that didn't come with strings and guilt. She reached for my hand. I let her take it. And for the first time in my entire life, we cried together. Not mother and daughter. Just two women. Two people caught in the wake of a man who only knew how to love by controlling. I'm sorry, she said. Over and over. I'm sorry I didn't leave. I'm sorry I let him stay close to you. I thought I was doing the right thing. I couldn't speak. I didn't have the words for the knot in my throat. We sat like that for what felt like hours. Her hand on mine. Her eyes full of something between regret and apology. And then I knew what I had to do. That night, I knocked on the door to my parents' bedroom. My dad opened it wearing that same look he always had, a blend of concern and pride, as if he still believed I belonged to him somehow. He smiled. Hey, baby girl. And just like that, the mask slipped for me. I didn't smile back. I didn't look away. I stood in that doorway, heart thundering, hands clenched, and I said, you were never my hero. You made me your mirror. His smile faltered. What are you talking about? You never loved me. You reflected yourself onto me. You wrapped yourself around my identity and called it love, but it wasn't. It was about control. It was about power. And I see that now. He stepped back, his face tightening. Fallon, that's not fair, I cut him off. No. What wasn't fair was being turned into your emotional crutch. What wasn't fair was being your lifeline when I was still a child. What wasn't fair was you taking my silence for consent. He didn't speak after that. He just stared at me, blinking, as if waiting for me to take it all back. I didn't. I turned around and walked down the hall. I passed the living room where the family portraits hung, past the front door I had walked through 1,000 times. And I didn't stop. I walked out into the night with no suitcase. No plan. Just freedom. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for wanting it. I moved 3 states away. No announcement. No drawn-out goodbyes. Just a quiet exit and a one-way ticket to somewhere that felt unfamiliar enough to be clean. I didn't tell my father where I was going. I didn't owe him that. I rented a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old brick building with creaky stairs and sunlight that pours through the windows like it's trying to make up for lost time. I started therapy twice a week. Different therapist. Different office. No history tying me down. And I wrote. Every day, I wrote. Not just in my journal, but on sticky notes. On napkins. On the margins of receipts. Words would come when I was doing dishes or brushing my teeth or standing at a crosswalk. Words I never let myself say before. Words I needed to bleed out of me. I didn't speak to my father again. No texts. No emails. No accidental phone calls. His number is blocked. His voice, silenced. And even though I sometimes wake up in a cold sweat remembering that night, the silence is louder than his presence ever was. And that silence has become a kind of freedom. One afternoon, I wrote a letter to the version of myself that still lived in that house. The girl who kept her door unlocked. Who mistook enmeshment for care. Who froze in her father's arms, too scared to move. And I read it out loud. Dear Fallon, you didn't fail. You weren't weak. You didn't let it happen. You were surviving. What happened that night was not your fault. None of it was. And your healing? That doesn't belong to him. It belongs to you now. It's yours to shape. Yours to protect. You get to walk away. And you're allowed to feel everything on the way out, anger, guilt, grief, even confusion. But you do not have to carry shame. Not anymore. Love me. If your love feels more like a prison, walk out. Even if you have to crawl. Even if it's your own family. Some people call that betrayal. I call it survival. And to those of you listening right now, I want to ask you something. What would you have done if you were me? If the person you were taught to trust the most blurred every boundary and called it love? Would you have stayed silent? Would you have convinced yourself it was normal? Or, would you have walked? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from you, honestly. And if any part of this story stirred something in you, please, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And hit that subscribe button. Because the stories we tell, they have power. They open eyes. They create change. And maybe, just maybe, they help someone feel a little less alone.